Welcome to the Sex, God, and Chaos podcast, a conversation built to help you address the mess, connect the dots, and defeat addiction. Doing your work matters because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Life is tough and we're here to help. I'm your host, Derrick, and as always, I'll be joined by Roane Hunter. Let's jump right in. Allergies are in full effect in the state of Mississippi, and we decided to fire up some microphones. How about it?
Oh, man, it's always good listening to somebody that's kind of stopped up, talk into a microphone, isn't it?
That's right, but we're committed. The thing is, we are committed in this season of this podcast to make sure that we are releasing new and fresh content for the listeners. And I know we say this almost every time we fire these mics up, but I consistently have conversations out in public. It happened to me just the other day. I was ordering at a local restaurant, and a guy said, "Hey, man, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you on that podcast with that guy?" I'm like, yeah, that's me, man. That's me. So people are listening, and the most important thing to the two of us is that it's helping not only men, but also couples navigate some of the most difficult days of their life, which is just so fulfilling.
There's nothing greater, nothing better. Even at our the last intensive that Ro and I did, had a young guy that came down here from Illinois, and he came because he listens to our podcast, which is it's kind of surreal, but
it is.
Actually, it was not the intensive. We had an intensive, and then we had deer camp. He actually came to deer camp because of just listening to the podcast.
Amazing.
So,
when we talk about it this way, I think we're always on the watch for how our digital world is just interrupting marriages and men's lives and women's lives. And for us to just kind of flip the script and say, you know what, we're gonna use the digital space to do good. Man, I wish there were more, and I know there's a lot, but I wish there were more people getting behind microphones, being honest about the difficult things to help people. It's so freeing to be able to sit in your vehicle and feel like, man, that person talking understands. And I didn't have to go to a therapist's office or a church small group. Those things are great. We wish people would get there, but a great starting place is a podcast, and here we are.
It is. As you say, man, when somebody like just out of the blue, gosh, I love the podcast. It's humbling, for sure, but it's also life-giving, just because you know that, man, God is using our broken stories much more than He's ever used our resumes, right? Mm-hmm. And so I need to get I'll give a shout out to our fan in Illinois. I won't call out his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Love him. So good just to spend the weekend and get to know him better and hear his story, and just saw certainly God show up in a powerful way, as He always does in that holy place, holy ground that we call Ebenezer Place. And so it's just pretty cool.
Yeah. And I not to do too much of a connection here, but I know we were talking right before we hit record about this big idea that we're going to discuss today. And I think, as you mentioned, Ebenezer, it just rushes into my mind, thinking about the men there that are alumni that have been there for a decade or more. This is definitely what we're going to talk about today, is definitely a characteristic that all of these men have. And the unique thing about this community is they will readily admit, I didn't have this when I first showed up. Now I do have this because other men taught me how to have this. So it's a word that's kind of been flying around in culture for quite a while. Tons of books on it, tons of sermon series on it. We're going to talk about it just from our point of view because it's our podcast. Damn it, we get to do that, right?
So we do what we want.
Exactly.
This episode of Sex, God, and Chaos is brought to you by Hope Quest Ministries, home of the Trek program, a 12-week residential recovery experience for men struggling with sexual addiction, pornography, or other life-dominating behaviors. If you've tried to change on your own and keep ending up in the same cycles, Trek is different. It's not a boot camp, and it's not a Band-Aid. It's a Christ-centered, clinically excellent environment where men learn to face the real story behind their struggle, to heal, not just to stop. Trek helps men uncover the emotional wounds, patterns, and beliefs that keep them stuck, and then rebuild their lives on truth, accountability, and grace. It's designed for men who want freedom that lasts, not just from addiction, but toward purpose, integrity, and restored relationships. I've seen what happens when a man finally stops pretending, gets honest, and lets God rebuild him from the inside out. That's what HopeQuest does every single day. If you or someone you love needs help, don't wait for rock bottom. Visit hopequestgroup.org to learn more about the Trek program and talk with someone who understands what you're walking through. That's hopequestgroup.org, because real recovery isn't about hiding the chaos. It's about finding hope in the middle of it.
So we're going to talk about resilience today, peppering in the idea that it's very easy to go victim, especially when you're going through difficult things. The sit and soak, we talk about that quite a bit. But let's talk about resilience in a way today that is going to help the people that are just in that acute crisis. And I'm thinking specifically the people who they're stuck and they keep going to therapy, or they keep going to lunches, or they keep downloading sermons, and they're not clicking into that gear that is going to be good for them long term. Maybe the best thing to do is just to define what we mean when we say the word resilience.
Man, I always like simple. I would say that like resilience is just the ability to be able to bounce back. We see it in sports. We see it in all aspects of life. But the hardest thing is when tragedy occurs, and then now what do I do? How do I get through this? How do I move on? And that comes in so many different ways, because it's this thing that we all are in, and it's called life. And we know that tragedy, trauma, to use psychobabble terms, it's inevitable. We're going to face it. And oftentimes it is the very, very thing that God uses in order to get us where he wants us to be. And certainly being resilient and being able to move through the tragedies is, I don't know if I would call it a skill set, an ability, a gift from God. I don't know, but it is essential to begin to understand what this looks like. And I just, it'll be going on the website soon, but I just wrote a blog about this. And the title of the blog is Resilience, the Antidote to Victimhood. And there's a quote in there, and I think I'd read it before, but it was, I used it. The writer, Anais Nin, I think that's his name, but I love this quote. What he said is like, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And that is a profound statement, because it's how we view these things that are going to happen. And so often when we've got kind of a negative view, maybe a victim view, these things become self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, I'll never be able to deal with this. I can't move on. And boy, that's when we're getting stuck in that place of, man, yes, we were legitimately, people are victimized, but all of us have been victimized in some way, shape, or form. And this idea of resilience is the antidote to be able to reframe it, understand it in a way that we are able to move forward.
Yeah, what you're talking about, and man, this is brilliant the way that you do this, by the way, is we're talking about resilience, but there's a belief about that that's motivating our behavior or lack thereof. And so many of us in our stories have had experiences that have convinced us that we have certain limitations and we definitely have a level of capacity. What I've determined and figured out in my own life, and I want more people to join me in this, is that those beliefs are false. We we normally build these beliefs when we're prepubescent, but we're living as adults with that belief of something that we determined kind of in our flat earth phase of our life, like, well,
Yeah.
I barely understand anything, but I'm going to make a very strong determination about who I am, what I can handle, the type of ability that I've been given. And those messages fly at us all over the place. Sometimes they are overt from adults that are in our
Mm-hmm.
lives where they put us in that victim position so they can feel more powerful. Especially conservative parents are guilty of this. Sometimes those messages are covert. We didn't make the team. The girl didn't choose to date us. And we interpret those particular things as, well, I'm just the kind of man that can't do those things or can't get those things. Then we face life as happens as an adult. And the truth is, when I'm sitting across from most people, they're very capable. They have a huge capacity. They
Yeah,
just they don't believe that. They don't believe
truly.
that. And then you layer on top of that, we have an ultra soft Western American society, which is extremely problematic. And we have distanced ourselves from difficulty, from nature, from gathering our own food. Like, we just don't have these experiences that show us what our true capacity is. And then we could layer, even on top of that, the lack of initiation that happens in current society. We're not intentionally put into difficult situations under the watch care of someone who is more capable and loving in the relationship. So we're kind of handed a very difficult process here to suddenly be resilient when we find the message on our partner's Apple Watch that they're having an affair. Like,
Oh,
well, now
yeah.
I've got to be resilient, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any practice being resilient. So this is such a complicated and nuanced issue, which is why we're talking about it today. But I agree with your definition, the ability to bounce back. That is a very simple way to think about it, because that definition implies you are going to get knocked down. There's no avoiding it.
It's going to happen, right? Those bumper stickers, that say life happens. I think
Life happens.
those are the ones that I'm
Okay.
referring to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just as you were talking, it makes me think of, man, I love Richard Rohr, and uh, in his, I think it's in Adam's Return, his book, where he talks about the initiation rites and the 5
It
things that
is. Yeah.
every boy needs to learn to become a man. And I mean, it's like, number 1, life is hard, and that's reality. And then, life's not all about you, right? That's humility, or that one is really sacrifice. You're not that important. There's humility.
Mm.
You're not in control. God is, and then you're going to die, and that's called faith. If we're going to
Too
put
soon.
biblical terms around it, right? But I mean, but that's just the reality of life, and all of us has faced tragedy or trauma. And I mean, it may have been a bicycle, it could have been a train, but we've gotten hit with it, and if we haven't, we're going to. And and really, I think this topic, or this theme, or concept, I do believe that this is probably core to our faith as followers of Jesus, and because so often, man, you can be in 100 Bible studies and be at church every time the doors open, all those great things. But man, when the rubber meets the road, when life happens and tragedy comes, so often what I see is a very shallow faith, uh,
Mm.
and and these are the very things that take us deeper into the heart of God if we are willing to allow it to. But so often we get angry with God, we blame God, we curse God, and now we're just in this victim mindset. Um, and there's a difference in being victimized and a victim mindset. And the antidote, I do believe, it is resilience. And I write about it in the blog. The verse where Paul writes, and he says, all things, and that all is a big word, right? All things, all things work together for good for those who love God. And boy, that's a resilient, packed Bible verse. Because if we believe that God is who he says he is, then he allows these things that occur in all of our lives. If we believe who we say what we believe and what we believe about him, that's a reality. And so, in some ways, well, I think in probably the core of our faith, this one idea of resilience is just a critical, essential part of like true, real faith. And it's the good and the bad. But we live in America. We want the good. And then when the bad happens, because even generationally, this generation, I talk about this often. I'm 64 years old. I'm 64 years young. Sorry. I know I look like I'm 80, but I'm really young. But like, I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers, and I was born in 1961. And really kind of after World War II, even up to today, 2026, we have not had to face hardship as a culture. That's, I mean, we're living at probably the apex of human history as far as abundance. There's been Vietnam War. Now we've got the Middle East stuff, which is just always going to be a constant. But really facing hardship is like think of my dad, who was a child of the Depression, World War II. I mean, those were cultural traumas, and then I think about my grandfather. He wasn't far removed from the Civil War, but he was World War One, the Depression, and World War II. When you look at it as far as this time, this place where we are, man, we are truly blessed. But we're still going to face these personal tragedies. And I believe one reason we are not able to handle it so often is because, just from a cultural standpoint, we have not really had to face hardship. And when life gets hard, that's where faith is revealed.
I agree. I've been terming it lately, and I've got, just to be as honest as I can on this podcast, I've got a lot of friends that are very upset with me about this language. But I term it an untested man. And I can read from 5 miles away, that is an untested man. I can see it on him. It does something to the human heart when the human heart has not been tested. And I think God understands that. I mean, you bring up Romans 8. I love that verse. I love pointing out that verse for that very reason. God uses all things, not just the things we're proud of, not just the easy things, not just the things we got degrees for or certificates for, or that got us voted on to the deacon board or whatever crap you want to bring up there.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, well, I'm about to, so might as well. This is what our audience expects, right? When you combine Romans 8:28 and John 16, where Jesus says, in this world, you're going to have trouble. Those two verses, if we were going to put a meta campaign over the Western church, over religion in the West. I would say that it's ignoring and combating through propaganda those two verses even being in the Bible, and they certainly can't be true because we prop up the people that God has only used the good things, you know. Well,
Yep.
sometimes cancer creeps in there. Like people love a good cancer story when you survive that.
Yeah.
Um,
Or I used to be an alcoholic.
I used
That
to,
one,
yeah, I
yeah,
used to.
that's a good one. Yeah.
The old self, right? So these verses with things working together for the good, and then in this world we have trouble. I mean, most of our gatherings, our Western church gatherings, you couldn't convince me of that when we get together,
Mm-mm.
that everybody's like, holy, this week had a lot of trouble. And thank God we all made it back. What do we do now? You know? So we've got a lot of stuff that is working against us in being prepared for moments or seasons, or let's be on the nose, relationships that require resilience, because most of it is we don't believe that we have what it takes. And not to
Mm-hmm.
drill too far down on the masculine point of view here, but man, nothing can cause trouble on this earth like a man. That's for sure. So
Very
men
true.
who are walking around who believe that they don't have what it takes, this is a big problem. And when we start talking about victimizing other people or going victim, I find that it happens in that order. We victimize other people. And then when we start to experience the consequences of victimizing people in relationship, and we have to start to change or acknowledge that we did those things, then we go victim. You know, we roll over
Mm-hmm.
like a little puppy and ask for people to scratch our bellies because life's so hard. The difficulty, though, is, and this is the question I'm leading to ask you, is if somebody's listening and so far they're like, man, we're 20 minutes in and I'm that person. I don't believe I have what it takes. I haven't gotten up. The affair happened 8 years ago and I'm still driving up to therapy, like barely holding it together. How do you transition out of a person who doesn't believe in their ability to be resilient into a person that does?
Well, just before I go there, when you were talking about just our Western Christian culture, whatever it is, I don't think I've ever heard a sermon preached out of Lamentations. Now, you probably preached a lot of those, but for some reason,
Nobody noticed.
we don't spend a lot of time in the lament of Jeremiah of the complete and utter destruction of Jerusalem, and I mean it's a horrific story of what happened at that time and at that place. I mean, ultimate hardship in so many ways. And I just think that, man, God gives us, I mean, like everything in Scripture points to this idea of being able to, I would just call it reframing these things that happen to us. I think the number one thing is acceptance, right? We have to, M. Scott Peck, his famous quote, good mental health lives in reality or is a commitment to living in reality. I always say, I would say that it'd be a better quote if it was good mental, emotional, spiritual health is a relentless commitment to living in reality. And so, number one is just being able to accept that tragedy, that trauma is just it's a part of life. Obviously, it must be part of God's design, and we're going to go through it. And then God gives us the tools, the path, the way out. Even the verse, probably everybody listening to the podcast knows it, has heard it. But the verse, Psalm 23, what it says there, again, God is pointing us to resilience. And I'll read it out of the Living Bible because I like that translation. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. So even in that in that verse in the Psalms, probably one of the most known verses in Scripture, God is speaking to resilience because he doesn't say, go camp out in the valley of the shadow. He says, like, okay, I'm walking through it, but I've got to accept, first of all, the reality of life. And that's one thing that I see so often is like, I don't understand why this happened. How could God let this happen? Well, again, that's a very shallow faith because tragedy is it starts in Genesis 3 and goes all the way through to Revelation. Tragedy is just a theme in the Bible. If there were like therapist types that were writing it back then, they would have called it trauma, but it's the same thing. And so I think the first thing is just I have to accept the reality of the situation because me just wallowing in it is not going to get me through that valley. Now, again, it sounds like, well, we're just saying get over it, right? No,
No.
that's not it. Because, part of tragedy in whatever form that takes is simply grief work. It is necessary. And again, that's just I think it's probably one of the things in our culture that we kind of suck at is actually grieving. And especially as men, I don't think we saw a model for it. I don't think we have been taught about it. When you look at other cultures, the Jewish culture, the grief process is a very defined process. Now, that doesn't mean that after the year of grieving and wearing all black, and then when you take that off and life is, you're back into life, it doesn't mean you're over it because they have, traditions like, yearly in order to remember, right? Again, that ties into Genesis, the Hebrew description of man, the word zakar, the remembering one. And we're called to remember, not to forget. And so we have to go through the grief process. The hurt has to be comforted. However, there is a point where we take off the grieving black garments, and then we put on the white garments of the life that Jesus offers us, and we begin to get back on the way, the truth, and the life, and we follow him because he certainly I think he knew a little bit about tragedy in his walk on this earth. And so there's the model, right, of how, when you see Jesus just expressing emotions, grieving over humanity, and then certainly even in his own ultimate tragedy, dying on a cross, you see before he gets there, he is grieving over what he knows is getting ready to happen. I mean, the model is there, but we do a terrible job of modeling that in this day and age. Jesus with skin on, and so we'll short circuit that. That has to be a part of the process, and then the reframing of what I've gone through. In the blog I wrote about, I use the Romans 8:28 verse, and for Eva and I both, Scripture becomes real when you actually go through these things, and then I call it. It gets down into the bone and the marrow of your bone. It's in your gut. It's who you are. It's what you know. And that's why I am able to say, I am so thankful for my sexual addiction that God allowed into my life. Because if it weren't for that, I would not be doing what I'm doing. I would not have the marriage that I have today, the ministry, the practice. Man, God used that tragedy, right? And the neatest thing is that my wife says the same thing, right? And she was a betrayed partner. And again, that didn't come overnight, but as we engaged in the process doing our work, man, the reality of God, the realness of God, the truth of Scripture, it's like Ezekiel, it's in my bones. I can't. It's a fire in my belly. It's gonna come out. And I think the most powerful thing is when it comes out in just how you live your life. And again, that sounds arrogant or something. I'm just talking about uh, the love for people, the wanting the best for people, to care for people, to walk through tragedy with them, and then to get to see them walk through that valley and then come out on the other side. I mean, there's nothing more life giving. But we're going to go through it. And even that quote, we see things as we are, and you touched on it, but it's this false belief system, kind of a negative worldview, like, man, I can't ever catch a break. All these bad things just happen to me. I'm like, who was the character on Peanuts, Charlie Brown, that just walked around with a dark cloud over his head, whatever his name was, right?
Yeah.
Eeyore on, Winnie the Pooh. But man, that's a mindset, right? Daniel Amen talks about these. He calls it ants. I want to say I came up with that, but I think it was him. But it's just the ants in our head are the automatic negative thought systems. And boy, that is a way of thinking. It's a very conditioned pattern of how we view our lives and view life in general. And like, boy, and I sit with people and I hear it, and I don't know. It's like I'm probably not somehow the most nice counselor. Thank God, because when I hear somebody say the phrase, I will just say, "Whoop, whoop, hang on. Let's stop, pause for a minute. Let's talk about what you just said." And and what I'm doing in that moment, because that was the way my counselor, who was a very good one, when I would do the things that I was doing, he would just stop. And when he saw it, he'd go, "Roane, you're doing it again." And man, it was like, holy cow. But I believe that's how that's how we grow. It's a blind spot because we're so unaware of these thought patterns, and being able to just catch it in real time and then beginning to reframe it. Because if I'm walking around thinking, I'll never get over this, it'll never be the same. Well, guess what? That is going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That will manifest itself.
Unfortunately, that's correct.
Totally. And so I've got to begin to reframe things is like, gosh, this is hard, whatever it is, but I can see how I am changing. I'm becoming a better man. I'm becoming a better woman, a better husband, a better wife. God is using this in a way that I certainly wouldn't have chosen it, but I see why I needed to go through this. I'm becoming fully aware. And it's beginning to reframe these ants that are just so ingrained. But I've got to become aware of it first. And if we don't have
takes
people
practice,
in our lives,
right?
oh,
Yeah, it takes
totally.
practice. Like
Absolutely.
the awareness doesn't happen just because you listen to Sex, God, and Chaos once.
No,
That'd be awesome.
well,
but
unless it does happen when you hear a sermon, doesn't it?
oh,
I
that's
think
true.
that's what
That's true.
that,
Yeah, 40 minutes.
There it is.
40 minutes you'll never get back, right?
That's right.
As you're talking, I'm thinking just in overlaps of my efforts, I just released on my Substack this month an interview with a Green Beret named Kane, and his phrase in that interview was to make pain your medicine. And he
Ah,
talked about that for like 40 minutes. But he said he was lining up. He's an ultra guy. He runs these 100-mile races, of
oh,
course.
like me, right?
Yeah, you probably know him. But he walked up to a 100-mile race to the starting line, and it started to rain. And we riffed back and forth on what that experience would have been like had I been there. But this was his take. When it started to rain, he reached up in his watch and he was like, "This is awesome.
Ah, there you go.
No one else at this starting line has suffered outdoors as much as I have. This rain is an advantage to me."
Wow, wow.
That was his perspective. My perspective, and I said this in the interview, had I gone up to that starting line, I would have hit my watch and said, "Well, doesn't this just make sense? I'm Ben Derrick, and I'm trying to do this hard thing, and now it's going to be even harder." Right? So those
Amen.
two mindsets, they were there, right? They're there in him. They grew in him. This mindset in me, because I have fed that beast in my life. I'm Ben Derrick, and things are going to be hard. I'm Ben Derrick, and I'm going to get a diagnosis. I'm Ben Derrick, and I'm going to screw this up, right? Those messages were put in there, and I think with what you were saying earlier, what's so difficult, and I say it that way for a reason, is that we have people in our offices that during this difficult time, they realize, I have a flimsy faith. I wasn't ready. All
Mm,
the committees, all the sermons, all the serving, all the casseroles, all the stacking the bricks in Haiti, none of it got me ready for this. So
amen.
then you just feel like a horse's ass for not being ready for one of the most difficult times in your life. And I want to flatten the bubble on that just a little bit in case there are people listening that are in that situation. I want you to hear you're not alone. You are not
Mhm.
alone not being ready. But here's the thing that we're saying today about resilience, the ability to bounce back. I personally believe that that is planted in every single person. If it's required for life, if in this life we're going to have trouble, if there are valleys of the shadow of death, then God will not put people on this earth who are unable, barring some large disability. God would not put people on this earth that are not able to handle difficulty. This word that we use a lot, and I know we got to be careful with our time here, but a word we use a lot in our circles is to encourage,
Mm.
to put courage into each other. And a lot of times people are using therapists to do that. And I think that's amazing because it's a contract and you're going to show up there and you will more likely ditch a friend at a restaurant than you will your therapist.
And it's highly
So I think,
important because
yeah,
the
that's
therapist gets paid. Yeah, it's very important.
exactly, like I'm investing money into this process,
Yes,
which I think is a critical part of growth. I
it
mean,
is.
where I wouldn't even be able to have this conversation with you had I not gone to multiple sessions with you talking about the idea of radical acceptance. Radical acceptance, right?
Yep.
Radical acceptance says the stage was set for this betrayal before I even met this person. That's radical acceptance.
Amen.
And I don't have a time machine yet.
Mhm.
I don't have a time machine to go back and change that. But here we are, and I'm the exact person that's able to get through this and navigate this as long as I have a healthy and proper understanding of myself and a healthy and proper understanding of the world around me. Well, how do we get there? You need other people to help you interpret and to encourage you and to tell you and to show you what resilience actually looks like. Because I will tell you what, and this will get me as angry as I've ever been behind this microphone.
Oh,
Religion
good. I
and
want to see it.
especially conservative
Mm,
Baptist religion will move in
mhm.
as quickly as possible, only rivaled by and surpassed by the charismatic movement that's been so popular in America over the past 20 years. They will move in quickly. They will offer you spiritual bypass, and they will
Mm,
keep you desperate and hooked into the system. All it is spiritual welfare. That's all it is. They'll hand you your coupon every week and your ticket, and you can go to the grocery
mhm.
store and get food for the week as long as you come back And as long as you give them 10% of that ticket they gave to you,
that's important.
that's
Yeah.
important. Be very careful where you go to
Mhm.
learn resilience, because if you go to the wrong places, you will learn a false resilience, which in the end will cost you even more. You have to be in honest relationships with honest people, men or women, like gender, that are able to tell you things like, I see that you don't believe that you can get through this. And that's important that you know that I see that. I can show you the way. What do you call it? I'm just a beggar who knows where to find bread.
That's it. Right.
The idea of resilience and bouncing back, though, is not reserved for the spiritual elite, and it is not reserved for the spiritual bypassing. It is something that God has planted in every person. Corinthians talks about this, that no temptation has overcome you except for that God has provided the way out. He did not say is going to put you in a little cart and drive you out. Right?
Jesus, take the wheel. Yeah.
That's right. Jesus take the wheel. He's provided a way out, and nothing is happening to you that isn't common to man.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to sell very well inside of therapy or sermons,
No,
but it's actually
not.
true. So my question back to you after that big long rant is, how many people walk into your office or to Eva's office after some sort of betrayal trauma, and they just have this idea, like all the other KDs have very happy marriages, right? I just saw them in the Grove and everything was fantastic, and here I am
they're
with
on
a porn addicted cheater.
I saw them on Facebook, right?
That's right.
Oh, I mean Facebook.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I think maybe what I'm trying to hook in as we wrap the episode here is that resiliency is dependent, and I want your feedback on this. Resiliency is dependent upon honesty.
Totally. And it's just being honest about what's really going on in my life, in my heart, in my marriage, in my relationships, whatever that is, because we're human and we suffer from this thing known as the human condition. And the spiritual bypass, all of that stuff, I call it counterfeit compassion. There's just nothing to it because it doesn't do any good for healing. It's very counterfeit because it's the realness of God and the realness of others that provides healing, and that is authentic community, not the fake book communities that so many of us are part of in our small groups. Not sorry, but it's the realness, right? And just that, when you're talking about the guy that reframed, and when he was running the race, psychobabble, we would call that regulatory flexibility. What a $10 psychobabble word.
That's impressive.
Oh, yeah, man, isn't it? Aren't you impressed? But basically, that's just that dynamic. It's kind of that dynamic, in real time adjustment in the face of high stress. And that word flexibility, even in that term, is so critical because you have to be flexible in order to move through life. And the hardest people that I deal with, and most often the most traumatized people, are people that have grown up in what I would just term rigid religiosity. And there's very little flexibility. And that's the hardest person to work with because they're not open to the realities of the human condition. It's supposed to be this way. Well, it ain't that way, right? And so that flexibility is oftentimes, it may be the most important growth area, is moving from rigid to flexible. Often it's like, Eva, and I see this especially in partners, and I think there's something to the dynamic of somebody like me who basically had no rules, no boundaries, nothing, and it was I wouldn't even, certainly I didn't know it at the time, but there was something in her that I knew I needed. And what I needed was like structure, uh, boundaries, those things. And Eve was a rule follower. And so I was attracted to that. And, and she'll talk about it. She was a very black and white thinker, rigid. She grew up in a rigid religious system. And, she's a rule follower. And so black and white, it's either good or bad, right or wrong. And there's very little nuance. They don't do gray real well. And what's been interesting in my growth and her growth is, man, we're much more in the middle now. She's much more gray, and I am much more structured. But that's what each of us needed, and in God's great sense of humor, He put us together at 15. Holy cow! But it's just, again, reflecting on our own journey, seeing the growth and the change and the movement in these dynamics, internal dynamics and relational dynamics. But that is just essential in the growth process. And dude, I know we talk about this 100 times on every podcast, but you hit it, that essential resource, life-giving resource of living in authentic community. And boy, that's got to be a part of the process.
All right. I was doing the podcast thing to like wrap everything up in a nice little bow because of our timestamp here. But man, you've really piqued my curiosity. So I'd like to keep going if you're okay with that.
I'm good.
Your discussion on rigidity and flexibility in the context of community really fascinates me, because I see a lot of guys, especially because actually one place where I am rigid is I just don't do community with females. I think that's a really stupid idea.
That's called healthy.
Yeah. So when I'm sitting with guys, and I've been in this game long enough to see communities come together, separate, guys be in community, choose to be out of community, that religious rigidity is something that seems to sabotage communities very often. There's a lack of flexibility even in how people are navigating community. Like, well, that person said that thing about Genesis and how long it took to create the world, and I'm just not okay with that. Or that person said the F word, and you know what?
Dude.
I just, let nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth. I'm like, they were describing, being sexually abused at 6 years old. They can say whatever word they want, right?
Amen.
But a distinguishing marker for people who are able to go the long haul inside community, I think, is exactly the paradigm that you're talking about. Where do they fall on the scale of rigid and flexible? Don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And man, when we do our intensives, the saddest thing is to see a 23-year-old single young dude, right? And he has so much shame. He's wanting to kill himself because he's, looking at porn and masturbating. Now, dude, that's tragic. And certainly, yeah, we gotta work on that. But what that is, and it is, I don't want to say always, okay, but 99.9% of the time, he grew up in a rigid, very religious home, all the stuff, and the amount of shame that he is carrying because of his sin, which I would just almost want to call a normal 23-year-old male behavior. It's just, that's the reality of life, right? You're a raging hormone. But he wants to, like, literally, he wants to commit suicide. And I just like, man, what hath we wrought? Not what has God wrought, but it's that it's the shame-based religious structure. and we probably ought to do an episode talking, going more in depth on shame.
No doubt
I
about it.
think we have, but there's always room for more.
There's more to
because
say.
it is what's driving so much of just again the lack of resilience, because it produces a victimhood.
Yeah,
In a
I think we're
mindset.
going to definitely, based on our plan, we're going to get to that next episode, which I'm excited to have that conversation. I just, we've been put in situations, and I'm talking about real life here so that our listeners can understand. We're not just getting on mics like, oh, we read a book or we sat with people. I mean, we're living this stuff out, and it gets really
We're in the
complicated.
trenches.
Yeah, but I know people have said to me, man, Roane really hurt my feelings. And I'm like waiting for, okay, well, you're obviously talking to me because you're telling me something new. Where's the new information, right? And people have said the same.
I'm surprised you didn't say take a number. Yeah,
exactly. Or people have come to you and said, man, that thing Ben said, or Ben didn't call me back, or blah, 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 blah. It's
I
like,
thought
look, man.
he used to be a pastor. Oh
yeah. Yeah. What a fraud.
Used to be.
But these things are normal. Like being able to be flexible inside of your same gender relationships and community, being able to be flexible inside of your marriage. Like, my goodness, well, we always have sex on this day. We always have sex these ways.